Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Tonight, we are pleased to present mayoral candidate, Lamont Jones, who is joining the Fair Housing Council to have a discussion about housing issues. This is uh, part of our mayoral series that we are presenting to the community as we head into the May 20th primary. My name is Rhonda Mays. I am the Executive Director of the Fair Housing Council of the Capital Region. And joining us also today is my co host, Mr. James Presley, who is one of our senior counselors and has been with the Fair Housing Council for many decades now. So I'm pleased to be able to present this discussion to you tonight. And thank you, Lamont Jones, for joining us this evening.
Yep, thank you for the invite.
Yes, so as I discussed, our focus tonight is on housing.
Hmm.
Now we understand that housing intersects a lot of different issues within the community, employment, health, um, the just the gamut. You name it, housing is part of that
Absolutely.
issue that we face. So we just wanted to focus in on your views and your ideas and your vision about housing in Harrisburg and going forward, how you plan as mayor, if elected, to handle the housing issue within the city. For one thing, we know that there's a housing crisis, not just in Harrisburg, but all across the country. So, what are your just general ideas and plans about housing? And then we'll get a little bit more specific as we go along.
Yeah, just as you said, there is a huge need for housing, affordable housing at that. But you also want to, I think, in my view, I think we also want to have uh, a blending of market rate, and you want to have homeowners and you want to have apartments and those affordable housing. So some of the problems that we see here, of course, we have our land bank, and right now we just have a bunch of lots the city owns. And it's very hard for people to come in and build that market rate at the time being. But you can look at this current administration building. Well, they're saying they're building affordable housing. But I think you and I touched on this before that you can't just come in and just place these things anywhere. I think it has to be strategically mapped out. I would love to see what that map look like, what that plan looks like, because who's going to live in these apartments? Who's going to live in these affordable homes? We can't continue to move poverty from one neighborhood to the next. That's not something that would be great for our city. We have to select these areas, take our time, look at these areas, and then who are we attracting? The type of people, that are impoverished in our community, how are we lifting them up to be able to afford these affordable housing? So some of those ideas, rather it's Midtown, Uptown, Allison Hill, South Harrisburg, and we have a lot of old infrastructure, especially when you go to South Harrisburg, where I think those uh, uh, apartments or houses were built in the early after the World War. So, when I go out there, I look at that, I'm like, goodness, we shouldn't have people living in these conditions, especially us not just being a capital city, but being a central space in Pennsylvania where we can get to New York, Baltimore, Philadelphia within a 2 hour spans. And when you go in those areas, of course, you're going to have projects, but even now, those places are getting facelifts in those areas. And I see this going on and on and on. And I'm wondering why we're so far behind. So I intend to address those issues, sitting collaboratively, working with fair housing, working with our redevelopment authority, working with developers that really want to come in and put some market rate homes in our community. So that's part of what I can see right now and some of the things that I'm going to be looking to do once we take office.
Hmm. So one of the issues, or one of the explanations that I always like to bring up when I'm speaking with the candidates is affordable housing is talked about a lot. And I like to make the distinction that affordable housing is relative, right? If you make $15,000 a month, 5,000 is affordable. The definition of affordable is 30% of your monthly income.
Right.
So if you um, make $1,000 a month, then um, $5,000 a month is not affordable.
Right.
So we're really talking about moderate income, mixed income housing, housing that is affordable for low to moderate income households. So I'm also a proponent of mixed income communities.
Hmm.
So, how do you feel about that? In the past, we have public housing, which is, usually a big sprawling area where low income individuals are housed. And I think a lot of communities now are using models that kind of get away from that, getting away from the public housing model and going into mixed income so that you are not able to point into a certain area and say that's where the poor people live. There's a
Absolutely.
lot of issues with that we won't get into right now, but
Yeah.
we all understand probably what they are. So, would you have a plan for building housing in a mixed income model and other methods that you have seen in other communities?
Absolutely, and I'm glad you brought up that word that's being used a lot, affordable housing. You know, sitting at council, a lot of people, a lot of developers come in, and I think that's just the buzzword that everybody's using. But I always ask, what's affordable? Say the numbers. I want to hear the hardcore numbers. And if they're bad, then if sometimes when we're looking at this, if it won't work, it won't work. You know, you got to. They're looking at vouchers, mixing in vouchers, and all of these different tools that are out there. And we really have to be careful now because with 47 down in D.C., a lot of this federal money is being withheld, and it's going to have an impact. So we have to look at it on how we're going to be self-sustaining, and that's something that I'm big on. I think being a deep studier and love, I have a deep love and passion for our history. And when we look at that, I look at impoverished people, African American communities, the struggles that we had. Not saying that we're the only ones that had a struggle, but specifically for us, we've always been able to find a way out of no way. And those are the kind of tools that we want to be able to use today to make sure that pooling our resources, to help with the issues that we're facing in our communities. But when you're looking at these housing and the affordable housing that people want to bring in and the blended neighborhoods that you're talking about, that's a need. You want to be able to have that because again, if you do take this project and put it over here, and it's gonna, if people don't care about it, people like, hey, my rent's $40 a month, and it's just they don't have a real concern for it. So I'm looking to build up those residents. How can they be in affordable housing and there's no jobs here? We have to find a way to make sure that we're empowering the people that's going to live into these properties. And if they can be affordable, of course, everyone needs some type of assistance. Then we got to look at everyone doesn't want to be homeowners. That's a huge responsibility. I was able to purchase my home free and clear. And it's a huge responsibility. But I knew that I had to do it because it's a building block to generational wealth. And so we want to be able to try to get people in position to do that, even if they can live in one unit and a duplex and rent the other. Everybody, we just have to, everybody has to pitch in on this. So the plan for me, again, is to look in the areas that are most affected by the blight. And if before we knock every property down, I would like to see some structural engineers go out and check the bones of these properties, because then I think we can get those investors instead of developers, right? And the investors to come in and rehab these homes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you see a lot of them. Like we could just take. I know this isn't a home, but I'm just going to use this for example. We can look at William Penn. They wanted to knock William Penn down. And you know, a lot of people was like, yeah, because they went in and they saw the cosmetics of William Penn. But this was a state of the art building. Next year, that building would be a wreck for maybe 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
The walls are this thick; it can't burn down. I mean, this is, you know, like you're going to tear this building down until we had some structural engineers go in and see and like this doesn't need to come down. The facing of it needs to be changed. So I think we take that same approach when it comes to the properties in the city of Harrisburg, especially the ones that we own. And I think taking back some of the ones that, and this is something, I don't know if I should put this out there, but this is just something that we're looking at too. When you have these slumlords that come in and buy up our property, you know, we got to be worried about redlining. So we have to be very careful who we selling our properties to, who we're selling our lands to, because people will just come in, they never live in the state, or sometimes even the country, and come up and buy up a bunch of these properties and just let them deteriorate.
Right. And that's an interesting, and I'm going to get back to that in a second because
Hmm.
I do have a question about that. But it's interesting that you talk about home ownership,
Hmm.
because at the Fair Housing Council, that's one of our major programs is the homebuyer education, and finishing that class um, normally qualifies someone to receive down payment assistance. And a lot of people may be surprised to learn that Harrisburg is a really popular place for our graduates to purchase a home in.
Hmm.
I think over the past 4 years, it's been at least $1 million worth of properties purchased. Just the individuals that come in for the Dauphin County down payment assistance.
Okay.
So there may be more. They just don't come in to get the certificate to take to the county. So, and there's a lot of people that, I mean, we've even had someone come from California to purchase a home in Harrisburg after going through the workshop, Philadelphia. We see people coming from Cumberland County and purchasing a home in Harrisburg because it's the home prices are affordable.
Affordable. Right.
Right. And the interesting thing, I think we all recognize that Harrisburg is a very, very old city.
Yeah.
It
The
was
infrastructure is.
founded in the
Oh,
1700s. So when they were building these homes for workers and others, and the business owners, the more affluent, they built these homes to last
hmm.
100, 200 years. And so when you talk about let's take an inventory of the condition of these homes, make sure that those that really need to be demolished are
Can come down.
demolished,
Right.
but those that can be renovated, which is probably the majority of them, I don't know for sure,
Yeah.
but are put back into homeowners and home occupied
Right.
status, and they brought back to a good standard, and that lifts up the whole community. So plans such as yourself
Hmm.
with looking at that, I know that is I'm pleased to hear that as a person that is really interested in expanding
Hmm.
the number of homeowners in particularly within the city, but just period,
Yeah.
home ownership for those who have that goal.
Right.
Um, so I think that now going back to the rental situation, um, one of my pet peeves as a director of the Fair Housing Council and also a federally certified housing counselor is the fact that um, residents don't have access to a listing of licensed landlords within the city. So that
Hmm.
means that um, a lot of times, the house may look or the apartment may look cosmetically
Right.
fine, but then when they start living there, they find all of these issues
Hmm.
maintenance issues that are going on, and this is kind of like the slumlord situation. But you have to do a right to know to realize whether they are licensed, which means they were inspected at some point in time, and the city has deemed it habitable.
So for me, one of the things you said several things, and I just want to go back to the one where how old our infrastructure is.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I can use the example of when I purchased my home. I purchased my home in I want to say in 2018. And when I went in, uh, good bones, good foundation, all of that. And then when I started to rehab the home, and it's in a good neighborhood where it's at, right? It's the community immediately, as soon as I got it, I went straight to work on it. And they were like, thank you, and again, we're lifting up property value and we're beautifying, and we have to stabilize these communities. We have to do that. So when I went in and I had to strip everything down, to the bones. I had to strip all of the paneling and all of the stuff down. And what I saw, which goes to your point of when they built these homes, the cedar wood that was in the baseboard. I mean, I was like taking this stuff off, getting ready to throw it away. And they was like, man, you better not throw that stuff away. You're not gonna find this kind of stuff anymore. And it looked like a brand new home. That cedar wood, there's no termites. I was like, man, this was amazing. For me to see. But then you have some, again, when you have what we call the slumlords and ones that you said people, it's like putting lipstick on a pig. They just cosmetically dress these up and sell them to the next person, and then there's a problem. So for me, I moved in. There was a tree in front of the home, and it got into my sewer line, and water was. I mean, so I just found all types of issues. Even though the bones of it was good, I had to end up rewiring the whole house, putting on a whole new roof, new furniture. I mean, all of this stuff was just but that's the job when you come in and do that, and not everybody will be able to do that. So when we have and I like what you said about having a list. The city knows who these landlords are, and the people that come in and buy and purchase, rather they taking care of properties before. And I mean, that just gave me an idea to be able to try to put some of that information out and be very wise and careful of who we are selling to. I just met with the Attorney General, Mr. Sunday, and I didn't realize this, but I'm glad that he pointed it out for me. It kind of, well, it does make sense that with them being, and with the law, that they can help us with landlord-tenant issues.
Mm-hmm.
And these absentee landlords, they can help us. And I'm wondering if any of these administrations are even utilizing that tool to help with some of our individuals, because at one time, the financial strain and turmoil that the city has gone through, we had a lot of power to do certain things and handle certain things when we owned our water, when we've owned the incinerator and all of those different things. And now a person, and it seems kind of unfair to a lot of people. It definitely seemed unfair to me when I purchased the home. I didn't plant the tree. I didn't put those pipes under the ground. And they're like, from the curb back, it's on you.
Yes, as a matter of fact, Mr. Presley and I were just having that discussion.
Hmm.
And you had suggested, Jim, that there's some kind of assistance program for individual households that find themselves in a structural issue because of trees that were there, and the trees are beautiful.
Hmm.
And they really do enhance and calm a community.
Absolutely.
You know, we're both from the Hill,
Hmm.
in an area of the Hill
It's like the
that,
meadow. I love that.
yes, that has lovely trees.
Hmm.
But they can cause issues,
Huge.
and
Lifting up the sidewalks.
yes,
And it was, not to cut you off, but it was great that I mean, it wasn't great, but I had to deal with the arborist and make sure that this tree was still alive. If it was still alive, I would have had to. It would have been even worse, but it wasn't. It was hollowed out on the inside, and I'm glad I was able to cut it down, because when we had them strong winds at one time, I want to say last year,
yeah,
right down the street from my house, one of those trees got blown over and fell on someone's house.
right,
And I was glad in time. I was like, whoa, I'm glad I got to cut this thing down. But
right.
yeah, they can cause issues. And I think, replanting, I think some of these trees, and we have to think about that. not just us, but future generations when we're planting these trees and see if these roots are gonna, how big they can grow, you know, and what kind of damage they can cause. Because now, again, the sidewalk, it's on me to fix.
Right, exactly.
And that's a problem, you know. So, but you were saying, I didn't want to
Right.
cut you
At
off.
one time, we did have an arborist because
We
at
do. We still
we
have that
still had the
department, yes.
arborist. Okay, so maybe having that project of going around and looking at the health of the trees and having those
That's
kinds
gonna
of
be.
conversations with the homeowners about the health of the trees and ways to maintain them and keep them from causing
Causing so much
issues.
damage, yeah.
Right, would be a worthwhile project because when I had the tree planted in front of my home, I wasn't thinking about all of these things. And
Just
now
like
the
this is
tree is
beautiful,
huge,
yeah.
right? Now the tree is huge, and I'm starting to say, oh, why did I do that? But yeah, they're beautiful and they really enhance the neighborhood and appealing to
hmm
folks who want to live in the neighborhood, but
Yeah,
there's
if
something to
you,
take care of.
and there's something else that you said that, you know, when we're looking at that with the renters and in our community, one of the things is uh, these these spaces that are being occupied and that blended community that you were talking about. I think that what that does too, that's a challenge for some people. Some people that rent their homes, they really take good care of their property, of the property in the neighborhood. And I think that could also uplift some of the other individuals if they're seeing the homeowners, everybody's, you know, in our neighborhood, everybody's yards manicured. You
Mm-hmm.
know, my neighbor will take my trash down to the curb, and
Right.
I come back, I'll bring them back. You know, and I think we have to look at people in that sense if we're going to not judge them, but actually empower, inform them, and maybe even educate them on some of the things that they need to be able to do to maintain these areas in our community. We cannot continue to ride through the city of Harrisburg and see, it just seems like it's object poverty everywhere. And that's just not the case.
In certain areas,
Yeah,
you
you
know.
know.
I mean, and I think that was the whole idea behind Section 8.
hmm
But what happens is that, certain neighborhoods or certain streets is where, the landlords are, they're accepting Section 8 if they
Yeah.
have a rental property, and others are not.
hmm
And so
They're afraid.
someone with a voucher ends up in the, kind of concentrated on certain streets and
Yeah.
certain areas of the city, and it's not truly mixed income
hmm
to the extent that we would like to see. Um, so I'm speaking about going a little further
hmm
than the normal way that we usually see Section 8. And that may be something that a mayor can do or a city council can do through ordinances.
A functioning city would be able. I think we all should be looking at collaborative ways. You
Right.
know, when I signed up for this is a thankless job. You know, being a servant or a city servant, public servant, is not an easy thing because we all have our own lives as well. But this is just something I believe you should have a passion for. And obviously,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you guys spent a lot of time in this space, so you have a love and care for this field and the people that you're going to be servicing in it. So, to your point, I think systems, if we're looking at systems, systems are built to work harmoniously, right? I mean, you can function with a bad liver, but you might have to get dialysis, but the body still works. But it was built to work all the way together. You have the immune system and everything is supposed to, that's the actual functioning, the defense, your actual defense of your body, but it makes sure you're keeping everything healthy.
Right.
So you look at the government no different, in my opinion. You know, a city council and administration should be working together, and that way we've taken an oath and we're talking about servicing the people that we serve, the residents that we serve. So I think you're correct in that, and having those intergovernmental relationships, knowing what these other entities do, I think we should be having quarterly meetings with the city council, the fire chief, the police chief, the county commissioners, the attorney general, the governor. We should all be sitting at the table trying to figure out ways that we can enhance the quality of life for the people that we are serving. So I think I think you're correct when you mention that. So there is something that could be done. Even right now, if you wanted to work with us, we have advocates, meaning city council, that body. We have advocates that want to make sure that people can get into these homes, and rather they're affordable, market rate or whatnot. We want to make sure that people have a good quality of life. So and there's things that we can do on our end, but we have to have a willing and able administration to make those dots connect. And that's where I think some of the things that we've seen falling short, not just here, but in other places as well. And nobody wins when a family feuds, you know. So
I have one more question. I know that your time is short with us,
hmm
but one thing that I did want to mention, because it seems to be comes up during the debates
all the time.
and pretty controversial on your part, but
hmm
the minority women disadvantaged
hmm
business position that you took with the Broad Street Market. Let's say the Broad Street Market is not necessarily housing, but it's in a neighborhood and it's an important institution in
Absolutely.
Harrisburg. So, and at the same time, having a focus on MWDBE participation as we were looking to revitalize, renovate, um, reestablish a vision for Harrisburg is important, right? We
Absolutely.
want to have diverse participation. So, what do you say about the controversy about the Broad Street Market rehabilitation and your insistence on looking at the MWDBE participation side of that project?
So there's several things, and I'm glad you asked this question because I really don't have a lot of time, and most of the times when these things come up, to actually explain. And I think this is the educational part that our city and our community needs to understand. The Broad Street Market was built in the 1800s, right? Um, the city owns it. It's our asset. So what we see going on in the market is just a landlord-tenant relationship, and I don't think people understand that. I'm not minimizing what's happening at the Broad Street Market, but it is what it is. It's a landlord-tenant relationship. The city owns it, and we should be governing. They have a manager. They have all of those different things that go on. So when this fire happened and everything went down, um, what I learned, I had to like get in construction 101 very quickly because I knew that the community was eager for this to hurry up and happen. But in my stance on not supporting the, the 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 process of how this developers or contractors were selected, that was my only issue. Of course, that got muted out and it got um, undermined by the administration because no one wanted to take accountability for what went wrong. It sat open for a whole year after it burned, exposed to the elements. I mean, we're talking about a history. What was going on? The public wasn't notified of what was happening.
It's
So,
still open, isn't it?
well, yeah, it's still
It's
open.
not
Now, I
closed.
think they covered up some of it, but it was a very long time because they cleaned it out now and they got the walls braced up and everything. So it's okay to be open at this point. But at the time it happened, it sat for a whole year with no movement. So we did learn the insurance was lapsed. Of course, we had a manager there that misappropriated or misused funds. I think he just recently got sentenced because of that. So there was a plethora of things that were occurring at one time, and to place blame on council was not fair. But we stayed quiet too long, and I talked to my colleagues, and I was like, by the time we wanted, they say a lie is traveling around the world while the truth is still trying to put his pants on.
Yeah.
So it was easier for people to grasp a hold of and point fingers. But what really was happening, and I said this at the last debate, as mayor, you have an executive power. I never said an executive order. You have executive powers, just like she utilized on the Broad Street Market, and it circumvented what City Council had our issues, because if you issue a state of emergency, the way that you're supposed to do that as mayor, you have to go through, send it to the clerk's office. You have to notify City Council. Then you have to put it out in the public, and let them know why there's a state of an emergency. And if you need it, and it only lasts 5 days. And if you need an extension, you have to come back to council and get that extension and go through that same process. None of that happened. There was a state of emergency. They were saying that the mice and the rats were big, and they weren't running into Cumberland courts and running out in the streets. But we didn't know any of this. That all I got is a phone call from the administration, and I thought we were moving along because as you talked about the MBE, WEBE, DBE, all of those different things, because that spend is crucial to what we can do here in our city. And I'm very, I have a watchful eye when we throw around those terminologies, because here's what ends up happening. Some people get pushed all the way to the bottom, and it has a huge effect and impact on local vendors and contractors trying to get business and, again, take care of themselves and their families. And we're always left out. So I get a phone call that was called, and they's like, hey, you were talking to us. This was Alexander Company. It wasn't them that actually made the call to me, but it was someone out of the administration that made the phone call to me and said, hey, do you know any plumbers, electricians, and painter? I said, oh, of course I do. So I was like, okay, we're getting some headway here. We're going to, go down here and get some of the people in the community. Because as I ran for city council, I vowed that I would fight to include local businesses, that make sure that they're included in economic growth of the city. And that's why every contractor that ever comes in, anybody, developer, or anybody, I just want to see how they're going to utilize the people, the residents that live here.
Right. Now, did anyone ever reach out to Capital Region Water? Because I think everyone is aware that Capital Region Water had a very robust um, participation, MWDBE participation plan.
Yeah.
So they have an extensive list of certified, qualified,
Now,
ready.
here's the way that we have to understand it. And I know I said local a bunch of times. Now I'm changing that language, because what local means in this field is not just Harrisburg. So and you could be an MBE, WBE, but you live in Lancaster, you live in York. So it's using that map, and that's what ended up happening. We got one person that got some business or contract for the Broad Street Market, and everything else was in York Lake. And not that we want to exclude those individuals, but right now our city is in a condition that we need to make sure that people are back. We're not manufacturing here anymore. We're not. They just closed down the thing in Stilton, the steel mill part, where 500 family or 500 jobs were eliminated. At least they, what did they do with them? They put them on, yeah, they idled them. So I mean, again, when things like that happen, you have talent right here in our city. So I look at the city spend when it comes to these things. So when you talk about that list of those certified contractors, vendors, or whatnot, we need to have our own list as well. Now, here's the reason why I'm saying that, because I look at the spend. The city of Harrisburg probably had like a $35 million spend, right? And 7% of that was WBE, MBE, all that. Now, I want to go inside of that 7% and see who was actually right here in our city, and that's less than 1%.
It's
And
not very many.
yeah, and
If
that's a
you're talking
problem.
about certified, now I know that the late Carl Singleton
Hmm.
was trying to work very diligently to get more MWDBEs in the city certified. That's a whole different story, and that's a whole different subject that we could talk about that later. But there is also a list, and a pretty extensive listing of all contractors
Okay.
that are MWDBEs that I know that Capital Region Water has. Because and the reason why I know this is because um, aside from my work at the Fair Housing Council, I was a community ambassador, and I also worked on the diversity plan subcontracted under the MT Johnson Group.
Hmm.
And so I know those lists exist, and they may not be state certified,
Hmm.
but they are very experienced contractors.
Right.
And so I think even though Capital Region Water is, technically separate from the city,
Hmm.
we are all serving the same
Absolutely.
community, and
Absolutely.
you all have the same tax base.
Hmm.
So, to just reach out and ask,
Yeah.
do you have a list? I know the city has one also.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe when you're talking about collaboratively
Sitting at the table.
is
Yeah. Yeah.
sitting at the table with one another, and kind of comparing what you have and what we have for the benefit of the people of the community, might be worthwhile. It's just a suggestion
No,
and
no, no.
something
That's
to be thought
again.
about.
That's a great idea. Again, because I've offered to some of the developers and contractors that came before council. Like, I always ask that question: how do you intend to utilize the people right here in the city of Harrisburg? If you need a list, we have some people that we can share that with you, and see
Mm-hmm.
if you can reach out to some of these individuals and give them an opportunity. So to finish answering your question about the Broad Street Market, and that was one of the issues when this rubric was put in front of us. Any other time we didn't see a rubric, and so it raised my eyebrows when it came. I was like, "What is this?" And, well, how we graded all of these contractors, and this is what happened. So I was like, okay, I want to see how you got to these numbers. How did you score them? Da, 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 da. And usually when you're getting into that space, you have to go with the lowest responsible bidder. So when what I did was ask for it to go into the committee and wanted to go over and review all the RFPs. And once we did that, what I was able to do, and some of my colleagues, we were able to point out the inconsistencies. Some questions, people were being graded on things that weren't even being asked,
Hmm.
and it seemed like it was favorable for one company, and that's where it was turned off for me. And the company that actually ended up getting the contract was an immaculate company. They had over 100 years of experience, and that was another reason. When you got all of these other players at the table, they're never going to be able to compete with them. And we had just given them a contract for F&B Stadium. So I'm like, 2 weeks later, you're back here again, and then you get this one.
Well,
So
let me
that was
get a
a problem.
clarification. So, are you saying that on uh, the questions that were being scored on were different?
Yes, I mean, someone's numbers were being changed. I mean, it was bad, and I knew, I didn't realize that once we made the votes that people would get in an uproar. But then that's when I understood they don't know what's really happening here, But even when some of the council members reversed their votes, I stood on my no because I knew I was doing the right thing, and that's what you want, people that's going to be able to be fair and transparent. And again, what we did, some of me and some of my other colleagues, Councilwoman Rawls and Council President, now Mrs. Hill, right, Bowers, so people can understand. But um, we stood on our nose because we knew what we were looking at and we knew it wasn't right. But we didn't put out our information, and so to the public. I would talk to people one on one and let them know what was happening, but I think it needed to be a broader way that we should have put that information out. And it just we sat on it too long, and we took some flack from it. But that's okay because I know at the end of the day I could have slept good, and I knew I made the right decision. And now it only held up that process for maybe 3 weeks
Mm-hmm.
because then we came right back with another vote. When the first vote went, remember it was 5-2 for a no.
Mm-hmm.
Because we went and looked at the RFPs and we seen the inconsistencies in it. Everybody agreed that it was wrong. I guess there was a couple phone calls made, and some people changed their votes. We didn't. I was one that wasn't going to change my vote. I got some of those same phone calls, and that's why I can say uh, some people may have gotten phone calls that actually get to try to get you to change the vote.
Mm-hmm.
But I just couldn't do that. And then, so they came back the next week. They got the 4 votes that they needed. Now it's back in the administration's hand. What's happening? It's not us. It's not council. So that now you have all of these new drawings. People. I mean, now you're extending. the time when you said that this was going to be done. I mean, I always use this example. They rebuilt I-95 like that. Look at the governors. It just caught on fire. They almost done right now. You know, and then you look at um, when people when they got that tent over there beside the market, that first year it was free. The city didn't get charged anything for it. Right now, I don't think the public's aware that as taxpayers we're paying $5,000 a month for that to sit there. January of 2026 is going to jump up to $6,500 a month. So we shouldn't be delaying the reconstruction of this brick building because it's costing us money now. You know, and it's actually, what about those vendors? Are we going to go get new vendors? Businesses are hurting behind that. And so we need to do something quick about this.
Okay. Yeah, well, thank you for that answer and the clarification about how that happened. And I promise this is my last question. I don't know if Jim has any other questions. I know you're on a
We talked about it earlier. We covered most of it.
Okay. So, I think about the new housing in Harrisburg. There's a lot said about the new housing. We're the Fair Housing Council. We're really happy whenever new housing goes up, and it helps with the housing crisis. Lord knows we need it.
Absolutely.
But I wanted to get a sense from you. How much money did the city actually put into the building of any of these projects, developments that city council is aware of?
Well, I know a lot of contractors were owed money, almost like $1.3 million from a lot of these buildings that you see popping up. Some people are still owed money. I know right now some of them are getting paid, and I don't know if that's due to election or.
Where did these funds come from? What source?
I want to say like the home fund. Some of that money went there.
Home.
Yes, and some of it was there from an existing, the previous administration. So I can't put it all on this administration, but there was a lot of things. And right now, and if I'm honest, and I have to be honest, that a lot of the information now is being cut off from city council and the resident. And this is hurting our constituent services. So a lot of information is not being given to us right now. The clerk's office can't get responses from emails, and so it's like we're digging for information. We're summoning people to come in front of us. We know that there's money that's out there that's not being utilized, and we're not getting any responses. So again, this isn't good for the people, So I can't give you an exact number on what was spent. We at one time when I first got there last year, we had quarterly reports, and I think that was the best way to be transparent because every department had to come in front of us, and of course they didn't like that questions, but that's our job. That's what we signed up to do, and some people sat in those seats, and you should be asking these questions. That's what accountability looks like. We can see what money's coming in, what money's going out, and where it's going, and the effect and the impact that it's having. Right now, we haven't had a quarterly report in I don't know how long.
Okay.
So it's tough to give you, specific numbers when some of this information is being withheld from us.
But as far as it's a little over $1 million that the city has spent out of the city.
Well, no, I won't say that they spent. I will say that was owed to some contractors because of the right now. This these numbers. Hopefully we'll get them soon, and I can get back to you and make sure that you can actually see what this is, and maybe I can talk to my colleague in the housing chair, and see if they got any information on it. But it's been very tough getting some of this information.
Okay. Yeah, because I know about the commitments and, generally the allocation specifically with the ARPA funds. A lot of us have heard about that. That's a whole different subject. You don't have time. But looking at specific numbers, we get the numbers of housing units that have been built, but the investment from various sources of funds that the city has, invested
Hmm.
through the developers or the development. Um,
So
how much
you
has
looking
the
at LERTA
city? Well, you're the council
yeah.
person. You're part of
I
the city hall. You would know better than I would what the sources are of the
there's a few different components
right.
that kick in when we're looking at that. And again, there's several moving parts. And all I can continue to say is that hopefully that we'll get the information that we're needed. So, because again, that's my job to make sure we educating and informing the people of what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, it's a tough time for us to do that. Other than going to these developers and businesses themselves and trying to
Mm-hmm.
have those conversations and seeing what we can find out that way.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, we're just going to keep pushing and trying to make sure that we're doing our job and our due diligence, making sure that we're looking over everything and making the best decisions. But even when it comes to fair housing, how much did they spend here? Are they kicking in here? And I think that's something that my administration will be looking to do to make sure that we can fund, because we all need to be working together. Now we can't give 50 million and all that. We don't have that kind of money, but we can also find pots of money that we can make sure that we are assisting and helping with the fair housing in our residents to making sure that they're getting a better quality of life. So that's something that I'm committed to do once we take office. That's on record.
Well, we certainly don't need
Yeah.
$50 million. We would get
Well, we could take it
lazy.
now. We could take
I wouldn't
it.
even want that. That's for another executive director to ask for. Okay, well, I thank you so much.
Yep, I thank you for inviting me again. This was great. I like having this kind of conversation. I think our community needs to know a lot of what's going on. Not sure what everyone else shared, but being here at council, I can see a lot more than what most can see. And none of it should be secret.
Absolutely. All right, so I thank you all for viewing today, and I hope that you have learned a lot about current City Councilman Lamont Jones and current mayoral candidate, uh, his position on housing issues within the city of Harrisburg, and his vision for uh, affordable and enhanced housing opportunities within the city. And I thank our wonderful counselor James Presley, who was asked at the last minute to sit in on this session, this discussion with us when our other co-host Edward Glover had an emergency and could not make it tonight. So good evening, everyone, and thank you, and we'll talk to you soon.